This NewsTalk 1010 podcast is brought to you by PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. Wrongfully dismissed, changes made to your job, lowballed on severance? Find out if you have a case before you call a lawyer. Go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca.
Ask any person who has gone through the process of divorce, and they will often say that the experience is challenging. Well, a gray divorce brings its own unique set of challenges that most people are not financially prepared for and add complexity to the divorce process. Gray divorce, we've talked about it before, it's a term referring to a divorce between couples who have been married a significant number of years, sometimes 30, 40, or even 50 years or more. Under the Family Law Act, all married couples need to divide the wealth acquired during the marriage through the equalization of net family properties. We're going to get into all of this and the unique challenges with gray divorces. Laura Paris is on the line, associate lawyer at Shulman Partners LLP. Hi, Laura. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You know, we talk about this on the show from time to time, and I know everybody has their reasons, but I often wonder, my goodness, when you've got 30 years invested, 40 years, and all of the, I think the difficulties that people don't anticipate, especially when it comes to the finances, you wonder sometimes why go through it in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think, to be honest, that most people don't go through with it for that reason. I mean, you have to think when you're preparing for retirement and you're in a relationship, you're not expecting that you're going to end up supporting two households when retirement comes around. So usually your plan is that, okay, we need to make sure that, maybe our mortgage is paid off so we don't have a mortgage, and make sure that we have enough cash flow to support the two of us. But if there's a separation, now all of that planning that you put in kind of goes down the drain, and now you got to start from fresh and think, do we have enough to do this for two people and to support two households?
Do you ever have people coming to inquire about a divorce and then after realizing how expensive it will be, maybe thinking twice about it?
Absolutely. You actually see that a lot, and I think that it is quite common in gray divorces, where you'll have people kind of just coming in for consultations just to get that initial information and kind of understand what their exposure is. And as soon as you give them that information, the next move that they're thinking to make is, okay, well, how do I make this work? Because what you've just told me is not going to work. So
right.
The easier thing to do is try to find a way to make my relationship work.
So there are apparently three main challenges that a family lawyer will see when it comes to gray divorces. What are those?
So number one thing, as I've already mentioned, is retirement. Again, people typically plan for retirement assuming that they're going to be an intact family and only having to support one household. So when you're dealing with a separation in a gray divorce where parties are already retired, retirement, the making sure that you have enough funds to be able to continue until your last days is important, because, like I said before, your retirement was planned assuming that you'd be living under the same roof, that you'd be sharing resources. Now, when considering, okay, yes, this is how we need to divide things in terms of our separation. How does that division now play into your retirement? The second piece is life insurance. Now, a lot of people in circumstances where they are entitled to support, some sort of spousal support. So, for example, if you were a stay-at-home mom and never had a career, there's not much likely coming to you in terms of retirement or pension, unless you took the time to kind of invest into an RSP or something of that nature. So the likelihood is that your spouse who did work is going to have the greater share of the income that's coming into the household. So in that circumstance, you're going to be seeking support from that spouse. The purpose of these life insurance policies is to secure that support in the event your spouse predeceases you.
Right.
Because, again, when you're planning long-term and you're relying on that support and you need that support in order to meet your day-to-day expenses, you want to make sure that it's secured, again, in the event that your spouse predeceases you. The third thing that comes into play are adult children. A lot of the time, when you're dealing with divorces of, younger couples or couples that are middle-aged, children don't take much interest in it. But when you're dealing with gray divorces, adult children are much more interested in what happens to their parents' assets, because typically they are going to be the beneficiaries of those assets when their parents pass away. So that's adds a whole other level of complexity, where you have, usually you're just dealing with person A and B, which is husband and wife, or whatever the case may be, and now you also have some additional people kind of chiming in, which are these kids that are also taking an interest in how these assets are being divided and what's happening with them.
And in some cases, those adult children might be being helped financially by the parents who are thinking of splitting, whose finances will be affected, and that might affect the adult children.
Precisely.
That's adds a whole other angle to it.
It's quite interesting, and I mean, even to that point, you find also that nowadays, especially with like the rises of prices. I mean, to live in Toronto or the GTA, that parents are starting to give. Where usually maybe in previous generations you didn't see that money until your parents did pass away. Now parents are gifting money to their kids during while they're still alive, to give their kids a head start. So that adds a further layer of complexity to things, because it could be that, parents are thinking, okay, well, we gave our kids this money because they're going to take care of us later on.
Right.
Well, now there's, when you separate, that kind of changes those dynamics, right? So it's definitely interesting, and I think the trends are going to become even more interesting as property prices rise and et cetera, and we start to see more of the baby boomers experiencing these great divorces.
So if there are people listening who either are considering separating or divorcing after many years together, or they know their parents might be, should they consult a financial advisor?
Absolutely. So that's one of the biggest things that we recommend when we're dealing with. I mean, it's important really at any if you're getting divorced at any stage to kind of because you're obviously dealing with the splitting of something that was supposed to take care of one household, and now it's being split amongst two. So at any stage it's important to meet with a financial advisor, but particularly when you're dealing with great divorces. And the reason being is that you may have to stretch that money. So for example, maybe it's a matter of you won't be able to purchase a new home for yourself, but the better option is to rent and use whatever extra disposable income you have to invest, and then build more money on that investment, opposed to investing in a real estate market. So again, having a financial advisor come in, take a look at your finances, take a look at what makes sense and what's going to create the most wealth for you and the most comfort for you is very, very important.
Should that be done in conjunction with seeing a divorce lawyer, family lawyer, or should that be first? How should people approach that?
I would say that the first step would be to meet with a lawyer. The lawyer is the one that's going to give you an indication of how things are going to be divided, and give you an understanding of what your exposure is, or what you're going to be entitled to. Once you have some clarity on that with a lawyer, and that may come right at the beginning, depending on how complex things are, or it may take some time before we can actually decipher those numbers for you. Once you have a bit more clarity on the numbers, then that would be the time to go to a financial advisor and say, here's my new circumstance, help me.
Okay, they're really interesting. Laura Paris, thanks a lot for this.
Thank you so much.
This NewsTalk 1010 podcast was brought to you by PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. Wrongfully dismissed, changes made to your job, lowballed on severance? Find out if you have a case before you call a lawyer. Go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca.